Hello and welcome to The Sofa, where we sit down with some of the most interesting participants here at the World Water Week to learn more about the array of water-related issues being discussed this week in Stockholm. All Sofa sessions are being live streamed at vimeo.com/SIWI, where they're also available on demand. My name is Eric Paglia. The Resilience Shift, ARUP, and SIWI's water governance facility are spearheading the development of a global framework and associated tool to help cities across the world better govern water, to ensure their water system is more resilient. In this session, we'll discuss how a better understanding of governance can improve resilience and unlock investment opportunities for the water sector. And joining me on this very crowded sofa this afternoon, representing a very broad collaboration, we have Luis Ellis, civil engineer at ARUP and a member of the development team for the City Water Resilience Framework. Dr. Gisela Kaiser, Executive Director of Informal Settlements, Water and Waste at the City of Cape Town, which is one of the partner cities. Fred Boltz, CEO at Resolute Development Solutions and Chair of the Steering Committee for the City Water Resilience Framework. Eduardo Vázquez Herrera, Executive Director of Agua Capital, a water fund in Mexico City. And Pilar Avelló, Program Manager at SIWI's Water Governance Facility. Welcome all to the sofa. Very nice to have you aboard here.
Thank you.
So Fred, perhaps we can start with you. What are the drivers for the City Water Resilience Framework project?
Eric, the project was inspired by the convergence of two initiatives launched by the Rockefeller Foundation a few years ago. One, the 100 Resilient Cities Initiative, which aims to design for the resilience of complex urban systems, taking into account governance, economy, society, natural and built infrastructure, and water is an underpinning element. And some work that I was leading on the resilience of freshwater basins or watersheds, and looking at how those two systems interact. And we discovered that because water is such a critical underpinning of so many aspects of the urban environment, that it could also be a key to unlocking that complex system and to navigating how to design for resilience, starting with the concept of water, again, as an underpinning of that urban system, and the urban system nested within a broader landscape as a critical driver.
Gisela, what have been your biggest challenges in diagnosing and building urban water resilience?
Well, I think it really starts off that resources are limited, and it's probably true in most places, but especially in a city like Cape Town, where we just simply don't have sufficient resources, money, people, everything else, to go around and do these things. So with that constant tension between the priorities, political will is critically important. So once there's an acknowledgement that it is an issue, and it really is an important issue that you can't ignore, there has to be a political will behind it. Once you have that, the challenge is probably to maintain it and make sure that it keeps on getting sufficient resources to outnumber the other issues which you have to deal with. So I think that we're in a far better space now because we certainly are fully on board and supporting the program, and it is amazing to be able to have the opportunity to work with 100RC.
Eduardo, how about from the Mexico City perspective?
Well, actually, I would like to add on the perspective of political will, which certainly it's always a critical factor. In our case also, we believe that it's so important to build a common vision regarding a particular problem. So we always undergo like a very huge analysis of key stakeholders across sectors. There's loads of interests around these agendas. So we firstly try to gather up these different stakeholders to create a common vision and then move forward into the political will. And also access to good information. Access to quality information in order to build a proper proposition is also a huge challenge for it.
And Luis, what are the overall objectives of this project?
So there are really three areas that we've been focusing on. The first is making sure that we're not reinventing the wheel and ensuring that we're building on existing plans and programs. And that's really why we have such a large number of partners involved. We have the Rockefeller Foundation, the Resilient Shift, SIWI, at University of Massachusetts, at Amherst, and a number of other different partners who are all involved in the project. In addition to that, it's about developing a framework to allow cities to be able to assess, firstly to understand their water system and get that collective understanding of their water system. Secondly, to assess their resilience and identify their vulnerabilities, and then be able to develop a water action plan for their city. And finally, it's really about a co-development process. So we've been working with 5 cities, Cape Town and Mexico City being 2 of those 5 cities, to develop the framework so that it's useful and practical in its implementation.
Glad to hear that my old alma mater, UMass Amherst, is involved with the project.
Oh, there we go.
I guess, could you perhaps tell us how the city water resilience framework was co-developed together with its city partners as well as other partners?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting time. I mean, pre the drought, we were pretty much from a utility point of view inwardly focused. Our operations were kind of stressed in terms of resources, as I mentioned, and we found that there's always people knocking on the door and wanting to assist. So with the drought, that really became a reality, and we happily opened our doors and accepted help and advice from everywhere. So it's been very much a learning experience over the past 18 months in how to do this. We've established great networks within the city itself and business, Chamber of Commerce, such bodies to actively engage citizens from grassroots level up. Part of when Louise was in Cape Town, a lot of the work they did was really interacting with stakeholders on the ground and seeing the reality for what it was. And the value that has added is, I think it really has gone a fair way in building trust between the state and the public, which has really been a problem. And it often takes a third party to come in and be the intervention or the in-between person to build up that trust. And again, we have a huge challenge that we can't afford to lose the lessons that we've learned in the drought, and we have to maintain these relationships, much as other priorities are likely to come up. As soon as the dams get to 85% at some point, then everybody will think, drought, what drought? Water isn't a problem. So it really is a challenge for us and all of society and our partners then to keep it alive.
Fred, do you want to comment on the partnership as well?
Yeah, and actually, Eric, let me come back to your alma mater, the University of Massachusetts Amherst. So the Hydro Systems Group, which is in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, has been pioneering the approach, the modeling approach, and the scenario development that enables cities to optimize among several variables. So water provision, supply certainty and storage, water delivery for drinking water, for sanitation, et cetera, energy provision, and develop, given our current computing capabilities, what's called a multi-objective optimization that enables then cities to investigate a variety of scenarios and compare costs and benefits to determine the best pathway to both effectively and responsibly manage their water resources while fueling economic development. Other partners that have been involved in the effort include the World Bank Group, that's very keen to incorporate that economic or that optimization analysis into their design of investment programs with partner governments. Mexico City is a terrific example of where the World Bank is working hand in hand with Agua Capital to bring those approaches directly to the stakeholders, elicit priorities from those stakeholders that then enables the design of the modeling scenarios to respond to local stakeholders' interests. And that ensures that there is, speaking back to the political will item, that this local ownership and enthusiasm for the work maintains continuity through political administrations and their change. There was recently a change in Mexico City, and thanks to the work of Eduardo and colleagues, there's still a groundswell of support for urban water resilience as an underpinning of development of Mexico City, and that will continue through political regimes.
Could you perhaps mention a few other cities that are involved besides Cape Town and Mexico
in addition
City?
to Cape Town, there's the city of Mexico City, Amman in Jordan,
Hull
in the UK, Manchester in the UK, Miami in the United States,
Greater
Rotterdam.
Manchester and Thessaloniki and Rotterdam as well. So we have two waves of city. The first 5 cities, we've done in-depth field work with those cities over a 2-week period. And then we have a subsequent 3 cities who have joined us, who we're beginning the desktop study work with. And we are getting continuing requests for additional cities to join the program. So it's definitely scaling up in size.
What progress have you made so far?
So to date, with our 5 original Wave 1 cities, we have undertaken the 2 weeks of fieldwork where we were looking at understanding their system, understanding what their factors of resilience are, so the things that are helping and hindering them to be able to cope to the different shocks and stresses that they face, as well as understanding their different decision-making processes. And we've done a degree of data analysis on that information and developed the City Water Resilience Framework and an assessment tool. We tested that assessment tool last week in London, so all 8 cities joined us in London, as well as our project partners, for a week of workshops called the Global Knowledge Exchange at Lloyd's Register Foundation's headquarters. And now we're going through the process of updating the framework, and we'll be testing it with our cities over the next months, with an aim that there's a developed framework by the end of the year.
You say there other cities are lining up to join in. Is there a time limitation on this, or is it an open-ended project?
I mean, the project has been developing in phases. So the first phase was to the development of the assessment tool, and the next phase will look at things like how we develop action plans from these vulnerability assessments, and scaling it up to other cities as well.
I guess you mentioned a little bit, but perhaps you can elaborate a little further on the value that the framework provides for cities.
So the fact that Louise mentioned that it was a simple and useful tool, it's supposed to be that the exciting part for me is that there's such a complexity of information out there, and to crystallize that into what is important and simple and useful to use. So I'm really excited about that aspect. And then also the fact that it takes on a holistic view. So it's not just about water in isolation. It really went along looking at our security and safety, physical safety and security, the health impacts, how everything from a resilience viewpoint is so interconnected, makes it so critical that it is a simple thing that you can track, monitor, and evaluate. I mean, we've got scorecards where we measured on something like 50 items from progress in audit reports and things like that. So there is really so much overload, and the challenge is to crystallize it in a simple format. And from my interactions so far, I'm very hopeful that it's going to be useful and be able to be used as that, so that it will really leave us in a more robust and more resilient space.
You mentioned that the drought was an incentive to join the framework. Do you think this will actually help you manage the water crisis in the years ahead?
To a degree, yes, because the information is aligned with what we are doing, and we're currently working on a strategy that is a holistic strategy that is not just about providing sufficient supply, but also integrating how resilience is going to play a part in our long-term future, and it's looking at the financial aims and everything else. So resilience is really an umbrella that covers so much of what it is that we aspire to do. And to get out of the water crisis, it takes a whole of society approach, and you can't just manage it in isolation and prepare additional water resources, because you are likely to run into the problem again. I mean, our rainfall is so variable, and with climate change, we're just not assured of the same amount ever again, really. So resilience is the way to go, I believe, from a holistic viewpoint.
And Pilar, perhaps you can mention how SIWI's water governance facility has been involved with this project.
Yeah, for us, I have to say that it's one of the most inspiring partnerships that I have been involved, because it's from moving to the resilience paradigm, and then how you translate that into something meaningful for cities and then apply it into the water sector. So the partnership has been super organic, and it's very interesting how different actors coming from private sector, from academia, from donors meet together and then bring those different insights. And it's very interesting because sometimes what academia is saying doesn't make sense to the practitioners. And in that sense, I think this co-creation process has also happened within the partnership, not only with the cities, but then also internally. And I think that's very important because at the end, what we want to create and to develop, it's something that makes sense for the cities.
I mean, how much cross-interaction do you have between Cape Town, Mexico City, the project financiers and other partners? Is there a lot of collaboration? You mentioned some meeting in London.
Yep.
And how much interaction is inside of this project?
So the Global Knowledge Exchange happened in London last week, and it involved all 8 of our partner cities as well as our project partners. It was 3 full days of workshops with mixed groups within those workshops, including the World Bank, all 8 cities, as well as Fred attended. So we had a really kind of varied group. We also had some regulators, so we had the UK water regulator join us as well. So it was a really collaborative experience, and it was a great opportunity for the cities to share their different stories and to share what's working well for them and some of the challenges that they face, as well as input and feedback on the development of the framework.
In that respect, I would like to add, for instance, for us, it's a wonderful opportunity, understanding that each city has its own reality and its own challenges, but still being that, for instance, Cape Town and Mexico City are on this famous list of great cities of the world that run the risk of running out of water. So how can we learn from each other? How can we share experiences? How do we tackle the challenges? And using a common methodology certainly helps out to foster an ordered dialogue, to find common solutions, to create these common visions, which certainly make the proposition much more powerful in a global arena such as this one and at the local level. And of course, taking into account the very important support of the partners, which are fostering the framework, and which is quite relevant for us as well.
I can perhaps just add to that. Again, in a space where time is so limited, and when you're operating a utility, you can't just swan out and go and interact with people as freely as you would want to. And my hope is that with the relationships that we've established and the simplicity of the framework really needs to enable cities to learn from each other without necessarily needing to send large groups of people from place to place to learn from what others are doing.
Yeah, I'd say that's a really important point, and I'm a member of the steering committee. The steering committee also includes the World Bank, ARUP, 100 Resilient Cities, the Resilience Shift, University of Massachusetts Amherst. We've tried to stay out of the implementation on the ground, really provide guidance to the project overall, and think about questions of how do we take this to scale, build adoption in financing institutions of the model. The real critical partnership and engagement is at a city level, and that's where they're engaging with local stakeholders from public, private, and civil society agencies. That's where the work gets done. So we've provided rather guidance on how can we validate this tool and validate this approach, drawing upon the city's knowledge, and take it to scale with more robust investments.
Very good. And Eduardo, from your background in finance, what value does the project provide for financial institutions?
Very good value, because resilience is closely linked into cost effectiveness. It's risk management, risk prevention. In the case of Mexico City, these kind of tools help us out to map out and prevent problems related to floods, for instance, to subsidence in the city and the metropolitan area, all the damage that the physical infrastructure suffers. And this obviously makes a compelling case to financial institutions all across the board, international, local, and even at the governmental level, because we're speaking about intelligent investments, portfolio of solutions with hard data. So it always comes into the numbers, and it always fortifies the case for these propositions.
What are your hopes for the future with this project and beyond? And how do you hope to get there? Eduardo.
Sorry. I was like,
Oh, Pilar, you can answer that as well if you like. A little different perspective, but
yeah. Well, in any case, for the future, obviously, I think thinking about the next steps is so important, the implementation phase, where we can actually transform the different variables and indicators into public policies and decisions that come into the ground. So right now we have been dealing with a lot of analysis, exchanges, design, and now we go into operation. I think it's a key moment in time, the next phases of the framework, and we all have to be able to put them again to the ground to show the results, which finally at the very end is what we're looking for.
And how about in Cape Town, Gisela? What's your future outlook?
So, South Africa is one of the most, I think it is the most unequal country in the world, if you look at the Gini coefficient. Cape Town is slightly better than the South African average, but the inequality there is absolutely stark. And I think that looking at resilience holistically, it gives us the opportunity to try to find solutions to improve the lived experience of everybody, but specifically the most vulnerable people who often get overlooked. And I think that most people, when they think of resilience, that's not really something that they conceive. And it was, to me, just a very good aspect when I first engaged with the framework, that it takes such a holistic view, because I think we're running out of time with social inequality and degradation of the environment, which the resilience framework kind of brings together under one umbrella. So, you could look at all our problems and they really are wicked, and trying to find a solution in isolation and in silos is unlikely to get us anywhere. So my expectations are in fact huge. We will keep on working with 100RC and make sure that we get the most of it, because the time is now. We just don't have any longer time to waste.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, on the running out of time idea, so how close are we to day zero in Cape Town at this point?
So we're actually really far away from it now. And I was just reflecting earlier that our communication was really out there and up front, because in Sao Paulo, I believe that they had already pumped out most of the dead storage out of their dams, and there was approximately 5 days of water left. Now, day zero, when it was announced in January, it was 3 months away to day zero, at which point we would have had 3 months of water before we had to pump out the dead storage. So that was when our dams were, I forget now, close to 20%. Now dams are at 62% and rising. So we have managed to not have a day zero this year, and there won't be one next year. But rainfall next year might be really poor, so our efforts will not stop. We are certainly still going full steam ahead, and we're not through the crisis. We're not out of the woods yet.
Well, certainly can't be complacent.
We won't be.
Vlad, do you have something you wanted to add there?
No, it was before when we were talking about the future of the project, and then how do we see it building on. I think we have advanced a lot on how to assess resilience, and then exactly how I see the next phase is how do we link it with the specific recommendations, not only in terms of big infrastructure, but then also we at SIWI, we believe also that it has to be also in terms of governance responses, And I think the project has been very powerful in looking at specific government governance responses and how can those make a difference in terms of resilience. So that's how I can see a little bit like the next step.
And Fred, perhaps you can say a few last words about the next steps. We touched upon this earlier, but from here on out, where does the project go?
Yeah, gladly. Well, as we were discussing, this was the research and development phase. This is just the design phase, developing the tool and validating that it does add value to cities' abilities to design for water resilience. The next phase is to move from concept to action, to work with the cities to translate these into plans to enhance urban water resilience, and urban water resilience is an underpinning of city resilience more broadly, and mobilize investment that enables us to ensure that Cape Town can avoid day zero for foreseeable future.
Very good. Well, thank you all very much for joining us here on the sofa,
Thank
and
you.
best of luck with the City Water Resilience Framework.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more episodes here on the sofa throughout the World Water Week.